The city of Drelith was alive with neon lights and alien voices. Tall spires rose into the foggy sky, and strange creatures filled the crowded streets. Merchants shouted their prices, traders bargained in harsh tongues, and the smell of spices and smoke burned the air. But in the middle of all that noise walked a woman who seemed invisible to everyone. Her name was Mira. She was human, a single mother, and she carried a small child wrapped in a thin blanket against her chest. Her clothes were worn, her shoes torn, and her eyes showed only hunger and worry. Every step she took was heavy, but she could not stop, because her son needed her. Mira went from shop to shop, stall to stall, asking for work. Her voice was soft, but desperate. Please, I can work, I can clean, I can repair simple things. I only need food for my son. But the aliens only laughed or turned their backs. A scaled merchant hissed at her. Humans are weak. I will not waste credits on you. Another waved a sharp hand. Go back to your dying world. Your kind has no place here. The crowd moved on, as if she was nothing more than dust under their boots. Her child coughed, a thin and weak sound. Mira held him closer, her heart breaking. The boy whispered, "Mama, I am hungry." Tears filled her eyes, but she forced a smile. "I know, little one. I will find something, I promise." But deep inside, she had no hope left. She walked into the marketplace where bright lights blinded her eyes. Aliens shouted, selling weapons, strange fruits, and glowing crystals. The noise was too much for the child, who whimpered softly. Mira begged again, "Please, I will take any job." But the laughter grew louder and crueler. One alien spat near her feet. "Even if I paid you, you would break in a day. Humans are fragile." The rejection cut her like a knife. Her legs trembled, and for a moment she thought she might fall to the ground. She wanted to scream, to beg louder, but her pride held her back. Her husband had died in the last war between humans and aliens, leaving her alone. Since then, no one trusted her kind. No one wanted her near. And now her son was paying the price for a war he never saw. As she stood in the middle of the busy street, clutching her child, something inside her whispered that this was the end. If no one would help her, her son would starve. She closed her eyes, feeling the sting of tears she could no longer hold. But then, she felt it. A shadow fell across her. Different from the tall aliens passing by, it was broad, strong, and human. Mira slowly lifted her head and saw a man watching her from a distance. He was not like the others. His eyes were sharp, his stance firm. And though his clothes were dusty from travel, there was something powerful about him. For a long moment, he said nothing, only studying her as if weighing her soul. Mira's heart raced, fear mixing with hope. No human had spoken to her in years. And yet here was one standing in front of her. The aliens around them looked with disgust, muttering curses. "Two humans, trash with trash," they spat. The man ignored them. Finally, he stepped closer and spoke in a calm but commanding voice. "You are looking for work." Mira hesitated, tightening her arms around her child. "Yes, but no one will hire me." Her voice broke. "I only need food for my boy." The man nodded slowly, as if he had already guessed. Then he said words she had never expected to hear. "I will give you a chance." The words hung in the air like a spark in the darkness. Mira's breath caught in her throat. She stared at him, unsure if this was a cruel joke. Her child stirred against her chest, opening tired eyes to see the stranger. "Why?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why would you help me when no one else will?" The man's eyes hardened, as if remembering his own battles. "Because I know what it means to be cast aside," he answered simply. "Come with me, and you will have work, but it will not be easy." The marketplace fell silent in Mira's ears. Though the world around her still roared with noise, she looked at her son, then back at the man. Torn between fear and hope, her legs shook, her heart pounded. She knew nothing about this stranger, nothing about his true purpose. But she also knew this was her only chance. Her lips parted. But before she could speak, the man turned and began walking away. He did not look back. Something inside her told her to follow, and with trembling steps, clutching her son tightly, Mira walked after him into the shadows of the alien city. Above them, the neon lights flickered, and the aliens whispered, but Mira did not hear them anymore. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of something she thought she had lost forever: hope. The stranger's steps were steady as he moved through the crowded streets of Drelith. Mira followed behind, clutching her son close, her heart pounding with fear and uncertainty. The alien city's lights flickered above, neon symbols glowing in color she did not understand everywhere. Tall and strange figures turned their heads to stare, their voices dripping with scorn. Another human beggar, they muttered. How pathetic. But the man walked as if the world belonged to him. He did not bow his head. He did not move aside for anyone. It was as if he carried an invisible strength that none dared to challenge. Mira noticed how even the biggest alien stepped out of his path, their eyes wary. Something about him made them hesitate. Finally, he stopped at a corner where the noise of the market grew quieter. He turned to her, his sharp eyes studying her. Once again, you are desperate, he said simply. And desperation makes people dangerous. Mira swallowed hard, unsure how to answer. Her son stirred weakly in her arms, his small face pale from hunger. I do not want danger, she whispered. I only want work, food for him. The man nodded, his expression unreadable. My name is Captain Reynolds, he said, his voice carrying a weight of authority. I run a small trade ship, nothing grand, but enough to survive. He paused, then added, if you come with me you will work hard, harder than you have ever worked before. But you will be fed, and your child will be safe. Mira stared at him in disbelief. A ship meant leaving the city, leaving behind the little safety she still had. It meant the unknown, but staying here meant certain death. Her lips trembled. Why me? Why would you trust a stranger? A human no one else wants. For the first time, Captain Reynolds allowed a faint smile to touch his lips. Because I have been where you are, he said, his tone heavy with memory. I know what it means to be unwanted, to be cast aside by those who think they are better. His gaze darkened. But I also know humans are stronger than they believe, if given a chance. His words struck something deep inside Mira. A memory of her husband's voice, telling her once that humans were not weak. They were survivors. She blinked back tears, holding her son tighter. The boy's eyes fluttered open, staring at Reynolds with innocent curiosity. The captain's expression softened for a brief moment, then turned firm again. Come, he said. Turning to lead her once more, Mira hesitated. But her son's faint breathing reminded her of the truth. She could not let him die here, not when there was still a path forward. So she followed, step after step, into the unknown. They walked until the city's noise faded, replaced by the sound of humming engines and metal doors. Ahead, through the mist, a small ship rested on the docking platform. It was not beautiful, not shining like the alien vessels nearby. Its hull was scratched, its paint worn, but it stood solid and strong, like its owner. The ship's name was written across its side in bold letters. Resolute. Mira stopped, staring at it. She had never been this close to a ship before. Her son reached out a tiny hand as if trying to touch the vessel from afar. Captain Reynolds looked at her. This will be your new home, if you accept. Before she could reply, the ship's door hissed open, and a ramp lowered. From inside came two figures, both aliens, their eyes narrowing as they saw Mira. One was tall with blue skin and sharp ridges along his arms, the other shorter with gray scales and glowing yellow eyes. The tall one growled, Captain, what is this? Why bring trash onto our ship? The shorter one spat on the ground. We told you before. Humans are weak. They will only slow us down. Mira froze, her body stiff with fear. Her son whimpered, hiding his face in her chest. She wanted to run, but Captain Reynolds stepped forward, his voice like steel. This is Mira. She works for me now, and if anyone has a problem with that, they have a problem with me. The aliens exchanged uneasy glances, muttering under their breath, but they said no more. Backing away into the ship, Reynolds turned to Myra. "You will have to earn their respect. They will test you, mock you, maybe even hate you, but do not give in. Show them you belong." Myra's heart raced, but she nodded, her jaw tightening with new resolve. She had been rejected too many times, broken too many times. But maybe here, on this strange ship, she could finally rise. Her son stirred again, whispering faintly, "Mama, food." She kissed his forehead and whispered back, "Soon, little one, soon." As she stepped onto the ramp, the air inside the Resolute felt different. It was colder, sharper, but it carried the scent of machinery, oil, and adventure. Her footsteps echoed against the metal floor. Every sound seemed to remind her that she was crossing a line she could never return from. Captain Reynolds closed the door behind them, sealing the outside world away. The ship hummed, alive with hidden power. He looked at her one last time, his voice calm but commanding. "From this moment, Myra, your old life is gone. You are part of my crew. Prove yourself. And you and your son will never starve again." Myra stood in the dim corridor, her child asleep in her arms. Her fear was still there, but something else had awakened inside her. Hope mixed with determination. For the first time in years, she felt like she might have a future, and though she did not yet know the challenges waiting ahead, Myra whispered to herself, "I will not fail." The Resolute came alive with a deep humming sound as Captain Reynolds prepared his crew for departure. Myra stood nervously near the control room, holding her son close while her eyes scanned the glowing panels and moving shadows. The ship was nothing like the streets of Drelith. It felt alive, as if the walls themselves were breathing. The air smelled of oil, metal, and strange spices carried from alien markets. To her, it was frightening and wondrous at the same time. The other crew members were not pleased with her presence. The tall, blue-skinned alien, Varin, kept glaring at her with open disdain. The smaller, scaly one, Rook, muttered curses under his breath whenever she walked by. They spoke loudly enough for her to hear. "She will slow us down. She will bring bad luck." Myra ignored them, but their words cut deep inside her heart. Captain Reynolds noticed, but said nothing. He believed Myra would prove herself, and the chance to do so came sooner than anyone expected. That evening, the captain called her to the cargo hold. The bay was filled with crates glowing faintly, holding alien goods wrapped in heavy seals. Reynolds' voice was calm but stern. "Myra, tomorrow we dock at Tolar Station. It is a dangerous place. Many merchants there will try to cheat us. Some will even set traps." He studied her face. "Before continuing, I need to see what you can do. You will join me in this deal." Myra's eyes widened, fear tightening her chest. "Me," she whispered, "but I know nothing about trade." Reynolds shook his head. "You know desperation, you know lies, and sometimes that is enough." He placed a hand on one of the glowing crates. "The aliens expect me to come alone, but I want them to underestimate you. That will be our advantage." That night, Myra could not sleep. Her son lay beside her on a small bunk. Breathing softly, she stared at the ceiling, the hum of the engines echoing through her bones. She was terrified of failing, of proving the others right. But she also knew this was her only chance to show that she was more than a burden. When morning came, the Resolute landed at Tolar Station. The docking bay was filled with rough-looking aliens, their eyes sharp, their voices harsh. Myra stayed close to Reynolds as they carried 2 crates into the market square. The air was thick with smoke, the stalls filled with weapons, rare stones, and dangerous-looking machines. Whispers followed them, cruel and mocking. "A human woman, how pitiful." Is this what the captain has lowered himself to? At the center of the square, a group of merchants awaited. Their leader, a wide alien with thick armor plates on his body, sneered as he saw Myra. "This is your helper." He laughed, his voice like gravel. "She will faint before the deal is done." Reynolds ignored the insult, his eyes locked on the goods they had come to buy. As the negotiations began, the merchants tried to play tricks. They swapped crates, spoke in twisted tongues, and hid their numbers with fast hands. Reynolds caught some, but not all. Mira stood quietly, her heart racing, watching every move, every glance. She remembered her days in the human labs, when she had to read faces, notice details no one else cared about, and suddenly, she saw it. One of the merchants was shifting the seals on the crates. They looked identical, but one of them glowed slightly weaker than the rest. Mira stepped forward before she could stop herself. "That one," she said firmly, pointing to the crate. "It is not what you promised." The square went silent for a moment. The alien merchant froze, his wide smile fading. Reynolds turned his head sharply toward her, his eyes narrowing with interest. The crowd of merchants erupted in laughter. "The little human thinks she knows trade," they jeered. But Mira did not back down. Her voice was steady. "You cannot trick us with weak power cores. This one is faulty. It will fail within a week." The leader hissed in anger, his armor plates rattling. But Reynolds stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "She is right, and if you try to cheat me again, this deal is over." The merchants exchanged uneasy glances, their laughter dying quickly. Finally, with a growl, the leader ordered his men to bring out the correct goods. The deal was completed, but the whispers in the crowd had changed, no longer mocking, now curious, even wary. Mira stood tall, though her legs shook beneath her dress. For the first time, she had faced the scorn of aliens and turned it back on them. As they returned to the Resolute, Reynolds walked beside her in silence. When they reached the ship, he finally spoke, his voice softer than before. "You saved us a great loss today." "Mira," she looked down, holding her son tighter. "I only saw what they tried to hide." Reynolds shook his head. "No, you saw what others missed. That is a gift." Varine and Rook were waiting near the cargo hold, their expressions sour. But even they could not deny what had happened. Varine muttered, "She is still weak, but maybe not useless." Rook spat again. Though less certain than before, Mira ignored them, her eyes fixed on her sleeping son. For the first time, she felt pride stirring in her chest. She had proven herself, not just to Reynolds, but to everyone who doubted her. Yet deep inside, she also knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was still cruel, and enemies would not stop testing her. But as she stood on the Resolute with the hum of engines beneath her feet, Mira whispered to herself, "I will fight. I will survive." The Resolute drifted through the black sea of space, its engines humming softly like a living creature. Inside, Mira sat alone in her small cabin, her child sleeping peacefully beside her. The soft glow of a small lamp lit the room, casting long shadows across the walls. She should have felt safe, but her heart was restless, her mind caught in memories she wished to bury. She thought of Earth, her old home, a world scarred by war and hunger. She remembered the day her husband went off to fight, a strong man with hope in his eyes. He had promised he would return, but promises had no meaning when war came. All Mira received back was silence, and the endless whispers that humans were weak, unwanted, and broken. To survive, she had worked in secret, in places no one cared to notice. She had cleaned labs, carried tools, and sometimes even repaired simple machines. She had listened to scientists argue about alien technology. Watching, learning, remembering, it was knowledge she never shared. Knowledge that made her different. Knowledge she now carried like a hidden blade. A soft knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. When she opened it, Captain Reynolds stood there, his expression calm but serious. "Walk with me," he said, his voice low. She followed him into the quiet corridors of the ship, the sound of the engines filling the silence between them. They stopped in the observation deck, where the stars stretched endlessly across the glass. Reynolds folded his arms, his eyes fixed on the glittering void. "You surprised me on Tolar Station," he said finally. "Most would have stayed silent, but you spoke, and you were right." Mira lowered her head, unsure if it was praise or warning. "I only wanted to protect you from their tricks," she whispered. Reynolds turned his gaze on her, sharp and questioning. "You knew too much about those cores. About the way they were made," he said slowly. "That is not the knowledge of a simple mother." Mira froze, her chest tightening. She had kept her past hidden for so long, afraid that if anyone knew, it would bring danger. Now she had no choice but to speak. "I once worked in a human lab," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I was not a scientist, but I learned by watching. By listening, I understood things I was never meant to understand." Her eyes grew distant. "When the war came, the lab was destroyed, my husband died, and I fled with my son. Since then, I have hidden who I am." Reynolds listened without interrupting, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You are not weak, Mira," he said at last. "You are more dangerous than you know." Her breath caught, fear mixing with relief. "I never wanted danger," she whispered. "I only wanted peace for my boy." But peace was not so easily found. Unseen by them, two glowing eyes watched from the shadows of the hallway. Varin, the blue-skinned alien, listened quietly, his expression hard. When Mira and Reynolds left, he stepped into the light, muttering to himself, "So, the human hides secrets." The next day, Mira went about her work in the cargo hold. She organized crates, checked seals, and repaired small tools as Reynolds had asked, but she felt uneasy, as if something heavy was pressing down on her. Her child played quietly with a broken gear she had given him, humming softly. It was a rare moment of peace, but peace never lasted. Later that night, when the ship docked at a refueling station, Mira followed Reynolds into the market. The air was heavy with smoke and whispers, the eyes of strangers watching too closely. She kept her head low, clutching her child's hand, but she felt the weight of danger. A group of alien thugs leaned against the walls, their sharp teeth glinting under the lights. They muttered to one another, their eyes never leaving Mira. Reynolds noticed, his hand resting near the blaster at his belt. "Stay close," he warned, his voice quiet but firm. They finished their business quickly, exchanging credits for supplies. But as they returned to the docking bay, footsteps echoed behind them. Too many, too close. Mira's heart raced. Clutching her son as shadows closed in, the thugs stepped forward, their leader grinning with cruel delight. Well, the famous human captain. And his little pet," he hissed, his voice dripping with malice. Reynolds' hand moved to his weapon, but Mira knew there were too many. Her son whimpered, hiding behind her. The alien leader sneered, "Hand over the goods, or we take them from your corpses." Reynolds stood tall, his eyes sharp. "If you want a fight, you'll get one." But Mira's mind raced, her old knowledge whispering inside her. She spotted a power line sparking above the thugs, a sign of weak wiring. Her breath quickened, an idea forming. Leaning close to Reynolds, she whispered, "The wires above them, shoot there." Without hesitation, Reynolds lifted his blaster and fired. The shot struck the power line, sending sparks raining down like fire. The thugs stumbled back, shouting as the energy crackled against their armor. Mira grabbed her son and pulled him to safety, her heart pounding. The leader cursed, retreating into the shadows. "This isn't over, human," he snarled, before vanishing with his gang. The market grew silent again, the danger fading into the distance. Reynolds looked at Mira, his eyes filled with something new. Not pity, not suspicion, but respect. "You saved us again," he said quietly. "You see things no one else does." Mira shook her head, still trembling. "I only did what I had to, for him." Reynolds placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and firm. "Then maybe that is what makes you strong," he said, his voice low but sure. But in the shadows of the bay, Varin watched once more, his eyes dark with jealousy. He muttered to himself, "This human woman will bring us trouble." As the Resolute left the station and slipped back into the stars, Mira held her son close. She tried to shake off the fear, but she knew now that her past could not remain hidden forever. Somewhere in the galaxy, others would learn of her knowledge, and when they did, they would come for her. Her son stirred in his sleep, whispering softly, "Mama." Mira kissed his forehead, whispering back, "I will protect you always." But deep down, she felt the shadows of her past reaching out, and she knew the worst was yet to come. Asterisk. The Resolute cut through the endless dark of space, its engines rumbling steady. Inside, the crew worked in silence, tension thick in the air. Mira moved through the corridors, carrying small tools, cleaning, and helping where she could. Sun followed her sometimes, his laughter bringing a warmth that the cold ship rarely knew, but not everyone welcomed that sound. Varin, the blue-skinned alien, watched from the shadows with narrowed eyes. He despised Mira's presence, her calm, strength, and the way Captain Reynolds began to trust her more. Each time she proved herself, Varin's resentment grew like fire. He muttered to Rook, the scaly one with glowing yellow eyes, "She will destroy this crew, you'll see." Rook only shrugged, but his eyes flickered with doubt. One evening, while the captain checked navigation charts, Mira brought him a repaired device. He looked up, surprised. "You fixed this?" he asked. She nodded, placing it on the table. "It was not difficult. I learned long ago." Reynolds studied her with quiet respect. "You are more than anyone here believes, Mira." Those words did not go unheard, for Varin stood at the door, silent as a shadow. Later, in the dim light of the cargo hold, Varin met with strangers through a hidden comlink. The voices crackled with malice, space pirates who prowled the outer routes. "She is with Reynolds now," Varin whispered. "But she does not belong. I will give you his course, his cargo, everything, in exchange for a share." The pirates laughed, their leader's voice harsh. "Done, Blue One. We will take the ship, and your human captain will not survive." Varin closed the link with a cruel smile. Days passed, and the Resolute continued its journey. Mira worked tirelessly, caring for her child and helping with the crew's duties. Even Rook began to soften, muttering less when she passed, though Varin's anger only deepened. The calm broke when the warning alarm screamed through the ship. Red lights flashed, metal groaned, and Reynolds' voice cut through the noise. "Pirates incoming." The crew rushed to their stations, weapons ready. Through the viewport, Mira saw jagged ships sliding out of the void, their hulls marked with scars of old battles. Her heart froze as her son clung to her, his small hands shaking. Reynolds barked orders, his voice steady. "Shields up, prepare for boarding, they want the cargo." The ship shuddered as enemy fire struck, the lights flickering. Within minutes, the pirates breached the hull, storming in with weapons drawn. Mira grabbed her son and hid behind a stack of crates, fear pounding in her chest. Varin fought beside the others, but his strikes lacked force, his eyes betraying no urgency. The pirates pushed forward with unnatural ease. Reynolds realized too late that someone had given them the ship's weak points. Blaster fire lit the corridors, screams echoing as the crew fought desperately. Mira knew she could not just hide, not while her son was in danger. She whispered to him, "Stay quiet, stay small," then slipped from the shadows. Her eyes darted across the bay, spotting a broken fuel pipe leaking sparks. She grabbed a piece of metal and struck it hard, sending a spray of flames into the path of the advancing pirates. They stumbled back, shouting in anger, giving Reynolds and his men chance to strike, but it was not enough. The pirates were too many, too strong. They overwhelmed the crew, and soon Captain Reynolds himself was dragged to his knees. Bound by chains, Mira gasped, her heart breaking. The pirate leader sneered, his voice dripping with cruelty. The great human captain, reduced to nothing. Reynolds struggled, but the chains held tight. "Leave the woman and her child," he growled. "They are not part of this." The leader laughed, his sharp teeth glinting. "Oh, they are now. Everything he owns, everyone he protects, now belongs to us." Mira stepped forward despite her fear, her son hidden behind a crate, her eyes burned with fire. "You will not touch him," she said, her voice steady. The pirates roared with laughter. "And what will you do, little human?" But Myra did not back down, her hands clenched tight. Her courage made even the leader hesitate for a breath. From the corner, Vareen watched silently, guilt flickering in his eyes for the first time. He had wanted Reynolds gone, but he had not expected Myra to stand so boldly. Still, he said nothing, the weight of his betrayal pressing on him like iron. The pirates hauled Reynolds toward their ship, their victory almost certain. Myra's son whimpered softly, and her heart shattered. If she did nothing, she would lose everything, her protector, her child's safety, her one chance at survival. Her mind raced, searching for a plan. Remembering every scrap of knowledge she carried from her past, she whispered to herself, "I will not lose again." Bay was filled with firelight, screams, and chains. The Resolute lay broken, its crew beaten, its captain captured. Myra stood trembling but unbroken, her son's wide eyes shining with fear. The pirates thought they had won, but none of them knew the strength hiding within the human mother they had dismissed. And in that moment, Myra made her choice. She would risk everything, even her own life, to save Captain Reynolds. The battle for survival was only beginning. The Resolute floated in silence, scarred and broken from the pirate attack. Inside, the corridors were littered with damage, sparks falling from torn wires, and the crew groaning in pain. But the greatest wound was the absence of Captain Reynolds. Taken in chains aboard the pirate vessel, Myra stood in the center of the cargo bay, clutching her son, her eyes burning with fear and determination. The crew looked defeated, Vareen silent in the shadows, Rook cursing under his breath. Some muttered that it was over, that no one could stand against the pirate fleet. But Myra's heart refused to accept defeat. She looked at her sleeping boy, then at the faces around her, and her voice cut through the silence. "If we do nothing, he will die, and soon we will too." The aliens sneered, their doubt heavy. Vareen shook his head. "What can you do, human? You are weak, even Reynolds could not stop them." Myra stepped forward, her hands trembling but her voice steady. "Maybe I am weak, but I am also a mother, and there is nothing stronger than a mother protecting her child. I will not let him die, and I will not let them take everything from us." Her words struck the crew like a spark in dry wood. Even Rook, who had mocked her before, frowned in thought, his yellow eyes shifting. Myra turned toward the control panel, her mind racing with memories of the human lab. She remembered blueprints, systems, energy flows, things most dismissed but she had quietly studied. Now, that forgotten knowledge became her weapon. "We cannot fight them head on," she explained, her voice sharp. "They are too strong, too many, but they are arrogant. They believe we are broken. So we must use surprise, speed, and their own ship against them." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. But slowly, one by one, they nodded. Even Vareen remained silent, though his eyes narrowed. Myra worked through the night, guiding the crew to repair the engines, patch the shields, and rewire the weapons. Her son sat beside her, passing her tools with small hands, his eyes bright. Despite his fear, the crew began to follow her instructions, surprised at how much she knew. For the first time, Myra was not just a passenger, not just a desperate mother. She was a leader when the plan was ready. The Resolute launched into the void once more. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, but Myra's eyes were fixed on the faint signal of the pirate ship. Her heart pounded, her breath shallow, yet her resolve was unshaken. She whispered to herself, "Hold on, Captain, I am coming." The pirate vessel loomed ahead, a massive beast of steel and fire. Its hull bristled with weapons, its decks crawling with guards. To most, it was untouchable, but to Myra, it was a target waiting for the right strike. She pointed at the navigation screen. "There, a blind spot near the aft section. Their sensors are weaker. We can slip through." The crew maneuvered the ship into position, silent and tense. Myra led a small team aboard through an emergency hatch, her child left safe with Rook. The air inside the pirate vessel was thick with smoke and oil, the halls echoing with cruel laughter. Every step Myra took was guided by fear, yet also by courage. She thought of her husband, of all the times humans had been called weak, and she swore she would prove them wrong. They moved quietly, disabling guards with swift strikes. And stolen weapons. Mira's sharp eyes spotted traps others would have missed. Wires hidden under the floor, alarms disguised as panels. With each obstacle she guided the crew past, her calm voice steady. Even Varin, who had betrayed them, found himself following her lead, his guilt eating away at his silence. At last, they reached the brig, where Captain Reynolds hung in chains, his face bruised but his spirit unbroken. His eyes widened in shock as he saw Myra step forward, holding a blaster in her trembling hands. "Myra," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "You came." She raised her chin, her voice firm. "I told you I would not let you die, Blaster." Fire erupted as pirates stormed the hallway, their shouts echoing. The crew fought back fiercely, but the pirates pushed harder. Myra grabbed a control panel, her memory flashing with diagrams from her past. She pressed the right sequence, and the cell doors released, freeing Reynolds and others the pirates had captured. Reynolds seized a weapon and joined the fight, his eyes burning with pride. Side by side, they fought through the corridors, Myra's courage guiding the way. The pirates snarled, but their arrogance turned against them. The crew of the Resolute, once broken, now fought with unity and fury, and Myra stood at the center of it all, a mother turned warrior. At last they reached the command deck, the pirate leader waiting with a cruel smile. "So the little human dares challenge me," he mocked, raising his blade. Myra stepped forward, her blaster aimed steady, her voice clear. "I am not just a human, I am a mother, and I will protect my family." The leader lunged, but Myra fired, the blast striking true. The pirates froze as their leader fell, their will shattered. Reynolds raised his voice, strong and commanding. "The fight is over. Leave now or face the same fate." The surviving pirates fled into the shadows, leaving the ship silent, breathing hard. Myra lowered her weapon, her hands trembling. Reynolds stepped beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said softly. "You led them, you saved us." Myra looked at her son as he was brought safely aboard, tears in her eyes. "I only did what I had to," she whispered. "For him." But Reynolds shook his head, his voice firm. "No, Myra, you showed us what true strength is. You showed us what it means to fight when everyone else has given up." The crew, once divided, now looked at her with respect. Even Varin lowering his eyes in shame. Myra stood tall, her fear replaced by resolve. She was no longer the desperate mother begging in alien streets. She was the heart of the Resolute, and her courage had turned the tide. Yet even as the stars stretched endless before them, Myra knew this was not the end. For every shadow she had faced, more waited beyond, but she also knew something stronger now. She would never face them alone again. The Resolute drifted quietly through the stars, its wounds slowly healing from the battle. The scars on its hull told the story of survival, of a crew that had been tested and nearly broken. But inside, something new had been born, something stronger than steel. Trust, unity, and respect. And at the heart of it stood Myra, the single mother no one had wanted. Her child laughed as he ran down the corridors, his small footsteps echoing. For the first time in many months, he laughed without fear. The crew watched him with softer eyes, even Rook offering him small snacks from the stores. Varin, silent and heavy with guilt, avoided Myra's gaze, but he followed her orders without complaint. The ship was no longer just a vessel. It was a family slowly learning to grow. Captain Reynolds stood at the bridge, his hands resting on the worn controls. He looked out at the stars with quiet pride. Myra entered, carrying a datapad with updated cargo lists, her son following close behind. She handed it to him, her voice steady. "Supplies checked, engines stable. We are ready for the next journey." Reynolds studied her for a moment, then gave a rare smile. "You have changed this crew," he said, his voice low but sure. "They mocked you, doubted you, but now they follow you." Myra shook her head, her eyes soft. "I only did what I had to, for my boy." Reynolds placed a hand on her shoulder. That is what makes you strong, Mira. You fight for something bigger than yourself. That is why you are part of this ship. Her heart warmed, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel pride, not just as a mother, but as someone who belonged. She looked at her son, who was staring out at the endless stars, his eyes wide with wonder. "Is this our home now, Mama?" he asked. Mira pulled him close, kissing his hair gently. "Yes, little one, this is our home." The days passed with work and laughter. Mira helped repair damaged systems, learned navigation basics, and even trained with weapons. The crew respected her now, no longer mocking but listening. Even Varin, who had betrayed them, finally approached her one evening, his voice rough. "I was wrong about you," he admitted. His eyes lowered. "You are stronger than I thought." Mira studied him, her memories sharp with the pain of his betrayal, but she saw the truth in his face, the weight of guilt pulling at him. "You endangered us," she said softly. "But you also fought beside us when it mattered." Varin bowed his head, silent. She did not forgive him fully, but she allowed him a place, for she knew the crew needed unity more than grudges. One night, as the ship traveled through a quiet starfield, Reynolds gathered everyone in the mess hall. The crew sat around worn tables, their eyes on him. He raised his glass, his voice firm. "We survived because we stood together. Because one of us reminded us what strength truly means." He looked at Mira, his gaze steady. "From this day, Mira is not just a passenger. She is second in command of the Resolute." The crew erupted in murmurs of surprise, some clapping, some nodding in agreement. Mira's eyes widened, her breath catching. "I am not worthy," she whispered. But Reynolds shook his head. "You have already proven yourself. Titles mean nothing compared to courage. And you have more courage than most soldiers I have known." Her son clapped his tiny hands with joy, his laughter filling the hall. Mira's heart swelled with emotion, tears burning her eyes. She had gone from a beggar in alien streets to a leader among stars. And she knew this was only the beginning. The next journey of the Resolute began with purpose. They traveled to distant colonies, trading, protecting, and helping those who had no allies. Mira stood beside Reynolds at every step, guiding, advising, and fighting when needed. The crew who once doubted her now looked at her with respect. She had become their anchor, their quiet strength. Yet Mira never forgot the lesson of her past. She knew the galaxy would never stop testing humans, never stop doubting them. But now she carried proof that humans were not weak. They were survivors, fighters, and builders of hope. And sometimes, all it took was one act of courage to change the fate of many. One evening, as the ship glided past a nebula glowing with colors like fire and gold, Reynolds stood beside her. "You know," he said, his voice thoughtful, "when I first saw you in that marketplace, I did not expect this." Mira smiled faintly. "Neither did I." Reynolds looked at her son sleeping in her arms, his voice quiet. "He will grow up strong, because his mother showed him how." Mira's heart swelled with warmth, her eyes fixed on the stars ahead. She whispered softly, almost to herself. "We were unwanted, but we found a place, we found a family." Reynolds nodded, his voice steady. "Sometimes, all it takes is one human to believe in another, and the galaxy changes forever." The Resolute sailed into the endless night, carrying its scars, its crew, and its new hope. Mira stood tall, her son safe, her future no longer bound by fear. She was no longer the desperate mother begging for work in alien streets. She was a leader, a protector, and a symbol of what humans could be. And her story, the story of courage and survival, was only just beginning.